up, you guys? The Curious Owl here, and today I have my August 2023 wrap-up. So August was not a month where I necessarily had the most productive of reading, but I did still complete quite a few books, so I am very proud of that. I didn't complete all of the books that I wanted to necessarily, but thankfully next month is going to be a little bit more of a relaxed quote-unquote month, basically because I am able to take any books that I didn't finish in August for Aurelium, and I can try to finish them in the month of September, and they will help count me toward another readathon, which I'm very excited about. So if you want to go see my September TBR, go check that out. It should be out by the time this video is. So let's just go ahead and get into the stats of August's reading. So in the month of August, I did complete 10 books, so that is very, very well done on my part. I ended up reading a total of 3,599 pages, and we had 0 minutes worth of audiobooks. I had 8 of my books that were physical books, 2 of them were ebooks, 0 of them audiobooks, like I said. And then I had 8 of the books that I read were from my own personal library, and 2 of them were borrowed from my public library. Then in terms of star ratings, a really good reading month, honestly. Everything I read was either 5 or 4 stars, actually quite split down the middle where I had 5 5-stars and 5 4-stars. So let's get into what I ended up reading this month. First and foremost, one of probably my favorite books so far this year that I'm so glad I ended up finally reading was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. So this counted for a couple of things. This was my read for the Full Moon Readathon, which was to complete the vampire prompts, which was the only thing I was really able to focus on for the Full Moon Readathon this year. That is a readathon hosted by Jan at Jan Agaton. And essentially then for Aurelium, this was for the prompt of a book for the shape-shifting class, the level O, which was to read a book about vampires. I also read it for a couple of things that I was doing for Aurelium that were like backlog things for a quest I wanted to do in the last semester that I didn't get a chance to, so this counted for quite a few things. But where has this been my whole life? Like, I so understand why this is one of Jan's favorite books. Like, it is so good and is so rereadable. Like, I am already thinking about in October wanting to reread this for the spooky season, so I think that that's going to be in the cards for us here in October. Next, I had a reread, which was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. Y'all know this is my favorite romance of all time, and you may be surprised that I had something that almost beat this in terms of my favorite romance this past month, but we'll get to that later. But loved this very, very much, as always, for essentially that quest backlog thing that I was doing. So that's the only thing that this counted for in terms of anything, but I'm always down to read The Hating Game. I was due for a reread, honestly. I was due for my reread, so I'm very glad I did, and I already just want to stay with Lucy and Josh, and everything about this is so good. Next, I had the sequel to a series that I really enjoyed in July, so I did pick up the sequel and was pretty happy with the result of it, but that was From Bad to Cursed by Lana Harper. This is the second book in the Thistle Grove, I think is called what it's called, series. Basically, it's a companion series following a town full of witches, and this in particular follows a sister of one of the main characters that we have in the first book, which was Payback's a Witch. Now, I will say I didn't necessarily enjoy this one as much as I did the first book, mostly because I feel like I kind of got lost at some points of like what exactly was the point of some of the things going on. Basically, in this book, there's a mystery going on where one of the main characters essentially starts noticing that there's a lot of dark and dangerous magic going on around the time of Beltane, which basically is the beginning of May. But what happens is that there's somebody that's trying to sabotage a lot of the celebrations surrounding around Beltane, and it is up to our characters who have this kind of like very antagonistic relationship starting off to figure out what's going on. And you find out that a lot of why they have this antagonistic feeling toward each other is because of a lot of miscommunication between the two of them, and a lot of basically lying by omission kinds of things, which I am not really a fan of in a lot of ways. I feel like that is something that is one thing that puts a bee in my bonnet. However, I do want to say that that did come up in another book that I read later in this month, that I kind of am choking on my own words with that because it was the same thing but done better. I don't know, something about it was different. But I just feel like I got kind of lost in the sauce with this one, if you will. Like nothing, I couldn't really quite figure out everything that was going on in here like I could with Payback's a Witch. From Bad to Cursed was also more so for this like side quest thing that I was doing, so it wasn't really counting for anything in particular other than that, and I really wanted to continue the series because I really liked Payback's a Witch. Next, I have My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, a very surprising read. This was on my self-destruct TBR for the year of 2023. I am really shocked at how much I liked this and how much I sobbed over this story. This is a very dark story that talks about basically how a girl was groomed by her teacher, and essentially it is playing on two timelines where you have the timeline of her in the relationship at 15 years old with this teacher, and then a timeline where she's in her mid-30s and some things have been going on with this teacher. He's basically being accused of sexual assault and predatory behaviors basically with other young girls, and you're kind of seeing this real confliction within the character of, you know, what was it that was different about her? Why did he pick her? Did he actually care about her? Did he actually love her like he said he did? And her really trying to go back into her mind to find out whether or not anything that had happened in their relationship was true to her. It's a really heartbreaking story, and it's very hard to swallow, I think, for a lot of people, which is why this has very conflicting thoughts on it. But I think that if you are looking for a story that's going to paint the picture of how very easily a person in power can overpower a child and make them get into this kind of a position in the first place, this is definitely a story where I feel like this is a really good kind of like example of that, and a good kind of cautionary tale of sorts about why it should be avoided having relationships with people that are in power, especially over you as a person, whether it's a teacher, a boss, something to that effect. This was also to complete a more side quest kind of thing. This wasn't really for anything else I can tell in particular. Okay, so now we're going to move into the books that I actually kind of had more so for prompts for Aurelium this semester. So the first is my first ebook for the month, which was Hell on Earth by Macy Blake. This is a shapeshifter romance of sorts, and it deals with hellhounds, and it is a male-male romance, basically centering around these two guys, where one of them is like the alpha of this pack. He is a hellhound. He is actually like the champion of Hecate. And essentially, he comes across this young man who stumbles into his bar and is basically acting really weird. He says people are after him. And so without question, without anything, because this guy is a guy that picks up strays, if you understand what that means, where like essentially people that are in danger or in help, unknowingly just gets himself involved in so many things with these people. He takes care of them even if he doesn't know them. I have friends that pick up strays very easily. They are magnets for strays. But in this book, this particular stray, we find out is very, very important to our main character. And so it's kind of split between both of their perspectives, and the love interest basically learning about the hellhounds and their world and what they do, and learning about being a part of a pack. I really liked this story a lot. I loved the idea of the pack itself. I loved the different characters that were involved in the pack. It's a very insta-lovey kind of story, though. It's definitely that kind of like mated attraction kind of thing, which I'm not necessarily like not a fan of when it comes to like mates, but I felt that it was very, very quick when this whole thing like was really getting going, and I just don't like that. I don't like that very instant kind of relationship, like, okay, I just met you, now you're my boyfriend kind of thing. Like, I don't like that. I prefer there to be more of a build up to something like that. But then again, this is, you know, when it comes to indie published work, a lot of times the brevity is the biggest thing for people. They want a quick read. So this was good by itself. I would love to see this in a little bit more of a fleshed out kind of world. I would like to read more from this series in particular, because there are other stories involved in this world, and so I will be reading more from Macy Blake. I just wish that this one was a little bit longer in terms of like the beginning and building up more of the relationship, as opposed to what actually happened within the first like 20 pages. Hell on Earth actually completed the first level of my elemental studies classes, which was to read a book with Earth in the title. Next, I have The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This was for a book club I was a part of, but also was going to work for the second level of the elemental studies class, which was to read a book with over 500 pages. My particular copy has over 500 pages. And this, I was, again, pleasantly surprised with how much I really liked this. I gave it a 4-star because it wasn't perfect, but like, I really liked this, and I do see why a lot of people were really enjoying this. And I definitely like would like to read the, what is this? The Daevabad trilogy, that's what it's called. I do want to read that one a little bit more because I really like the idea of the djinn in this. And I know that this was supposed to have like been inspired in some ways by the Daevabad trilogy. So I think that's going to go a little bit higher on my TBR here because I've heard really good things about that trilogy as well. But Stardust Thief basically follows a few different characters, but the main one being a young girl who basically is companioned with a djinn, and she's grown up with him. He has shown her things, he has protected her, and she is actually joining up with a band of people who are going after djinn and are after their relics and are looking to kill the djinn. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding around this too, because then there is a rogue djinn that starts to basically kill a bunch of people, and when this whole thing kind of kicks off and they go after this relic, there is this big mystery of what is going on with this djinn. How do they stop them? How do they, you know, do anything with it? And so it's really a really cool story. I just felt like I got a little lost here and there. I feel like this is something I would have to definitely reread before getting into the second book when it comes out, just because I feel like I got a little lost about partway through with some of like the events that happened. Now we get to the book that took me the longest time to read for no reason, and I think it did impact in some ways my entire enjoyment of the book. But this was Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron. Now, this book was for my final elemental studies prompt, which was to read a book with snakes on the cover, and I liked the idea of the story. I really did. I really liked the concept of it and what it was going for, but for some reason, this book took me so long to get through. It felt like it was an eternity getting through this book. And I feel like that by itself really hampered my enjoyment of it. I feel like maybe if I was to reread this and if I had a better time with a reread of it before getting on to Reaper of Souls, I would enjoy it a lot more because I really liked a lot of what this was going for. This follows a woman who basically has no magical abilities. She comes from a very long line of magic wielders, and unfortunately she is not one of them and is very much looked down upon by her mother. But she starts understanding that it's not because she's not going to get powers, but there's a very certain fated destiny for her. And her grandmother tells her this, and basically how she is destined to do something really terrifying and like complicated. And it's like a whole like mess of things that happens that gets her this ability. And she may or may not have to sell her soul to the devil, in a sense, to a demon. You know, it could very well be that she would have to do that, but then there's also this whole thing where she's in love with her best friend, and there's like a lot of like Romeo and Juliet-esque kind of things going on with that because he is the son of her mother's enemy, and it's a whole big mess. But a really cool concept. I just think I need to reread it, and if I can have a better time with a reread of it, I think I'm going to enjoy it a lot more. Okay, the next book was a book I was very surprised I enjoyed and almost beat out The Hating Game for my favorite romance. And that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I know, I did not think I was going to like this. I said from the very beginning when I put this on my self-destruct TBR for 2023 that I was not sure if I was going to like this fake dating nonsense. And I loved the fake dating nonsense. Oh my god, I fell in love with Olive, and I don't even know what it is, because I think normally Olive is a person that I would just want to throttle because of the stupid decisions she makes and the lies that she tells and the things that she does to hurt herself in order to make other people happy. But quite honestly, I relate to Olive in that way. I really relate to Olive in a lot of ways with that. And I just really loved the construction of this. And then what happens toward like that third act breakup, typically, I was really shocked with something that came up, but was so needed. And I was so happy to see that it was brought up, especially when it comes to women in the STEM community. There's a lot of stuff that I don't want to divulge because I would like people to read this for themselves, but there is an incident that happens in like the third act of this that I was floored with how it all went about, and it felt so good to see the resolution come out of it. Like, I literally sat there while I read this and was like, yes, 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 yes. Like, I was so excited because I was so hoping that the resolution would go that way where I would be feeling like that. So honestly, like I said, this almost beat out The Hating Game for me. There was a couple things, like, I'm not a big fan, I think, of Adam and his broodiness. I think I've seen a lot of broody guys done a lot more, like, clearly for me. I don't know what it is. Just, I think it's because I had Adam Driver in my head too much, and Adam Driver, to me, is not necessarily, like, that brooding of a guy, like, even as, like, Kylo Ren. I don't think he's that scary. I don't think he's that tough. I don't think he's that dark and scary at all. So I think that kind of ruined it for me in some ways, but I loved this so much, and I ended up buying all of the other books that Ali Hazelwood has come out with so far, including Love Theoretically, which just came out. So I think I'm going to be reading more Ali Hazelwood soon, and definitely will be rereading this because I love this so much. I would be even willing to annotate my book. That's how much I'm loving it. Because y'all know annotating is something I do very rarely because I don't want to I don't want to write in my books all the time. But this is one of those books where I will definitely annotate it. And the next time I read The Hating Game, I'm going to be annotating it. So very excited. I think I may do a readathon where, like, a little, like, mini readathon at some point when I can find the time to, where I read, like, a bunch of books that I want to annotate. I think that'd be really fun. Let me know if you guys would want to see that. The Love Hypothesis was for my astronomy class for the first level, which was to read a book with a word in the title that was from the last song I had listened to, which the word was love. The next book I read was my N.K. Jemisin read for the month, which was How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jemisin. This is a collection of short stories, and I have such a hard time with reading short story collections in general. It is very rare I can give them a 5-star because of the fact that there's usually at least one story that I didn't love as much. So overall, the collection gets a 4. That's a pretty standard rating for me. I think that that's a very high rating for a collection, and I definitely feel like this is a very good collection. There definitely were some stories I didn't like as much, but there were a lot that I really, really enjoyed, and I think that NK has a lot of really good things with this. But I also have a little bit of a vlog that you can go watch. For Aurelium, this was to complete my level 1 prompt for the restoration class, which was to read a book before bed, and I did start this before going to bed one night. I started listening to the audiobook. And finally, the last book I ended up reading was Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler. This was the Octavia E. Butler read for the month of August. Vampires. Oh my god, vampires. I loved this so much. Like, this, if this is not a movie, this needs to be made into a movie. This would be such a bad-ass vampire movie. Like, seriously, it is so good. This is probably one of my favorite Octavia E. Butler books we have read. It is that good. It is like, I think this may even be my favorite, because I don't know off the top of my head anymore if I have a favorite Octavia E. Butler book. But this one, if it's not already listed, may come real close to that. It's vampires, vampire community, a lot of history, a lot of lore, a lot of fighting back. It's great. Just read it. Just, if you don't read anything else by Octavia E. Butler, just read Fledgling. It's perfect. It's absolutely wonderful. For Aurelium, this was to complete the level Q for restoration, which was to read a book in a different place each time you pick it up. So I read this like in multiple different places, in my car, in my living room, in bed, in my office, when I was at a store, you know, like I read it in so many different places by listening just to, like, to the audiobook, for instance. But there you guys have it. Those are all the books I ended up reading in the month of August. A really good stack pretty much for the, like, I think honestly, I could have done a lot worse. I really could have. I could have done so much worse with my reading. I'm just glad that everything was a 4 or 5 star, and I did read 10 books as opposed to probably what would have been maybe half of that if I had still been stuck on Kingdom of Souls. But that was just a really hard one for me to get through for some reason. But it's a new month. We're gonna start fresh, and I'm very excited to see how September goes, and hopefully things pan out a little bit better in terms of my reading. My hope is that I can read probably maybe almost twice this. We'll see. We'll see. I'm not gonna like put that on myself just yet, but it might get pretty close is all I'll say. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys.